Welcome to the Zeroed In podcast. Today we have my good friend and coach, Beka Shea. And what Beka does is she uses science to help CEOs build great leadership teams. And I have personally worked with Beka and had some phenomenal results. So I'm extremely excited to dive into leadership and how she finds good talent, how she'll help you find good talent, and everything that you really need to know to actually build an organization instead of you just being a one-man show all the time, which solo entrepreneurs always end up doing because they suck at hiring and leading people.
Welcome to the Zeroed In podcast. I'm your host, John Lalonde, a seasoned real estate investment expert and former Marine recon sniper. This podcast is designed for those seeking effective strategies to increase revenue growth through strategic hiring, leadership, and effective tracking. Our focus here is clear and direct. We provide actionable insights from successful founders and growth experts. Whether you're establishing a new business or aiming to scale an existing one, our episodes offer the essential advice you need for practical business growth. Lock and load, zero in, and get ready to scale.
So, Beka, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So can you explain what you mean by that? So it's right before we were just talking, you said you use science to help CEOs build great leadership teams. How do you do that?
There's this science called behavioral analytics or psychometrics, and it's personality surveys. Most people have done them. The question is, how accurate are they and what do you actually do with that information? And some personality surveys are more accurate and more usable than others. And I personally work with one called Culture Index. And what we do is the first thing is we help you understand who you are. Like as a leader, how do you show up every day? Because making that turn around the bend from solopreneur to leader of people is very hard. And especially when you're paying their payroll, it's coming out of your pocket. You want to make sure you do it right. So that's what we do.
So it's interesting because I wasn't thinking about diving into it, but it is the first part now that I look back at what we've done is you need to be aware of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are the leader. A lot of times we just think, oh, I'm perfect and everybody else around me is the problem. So let me do a bunch of studies on them so I can figure out how to fix them, right? But you have your own flaws. What do you see are typical, like things that people don't recognize about themselves when they do the survey? And then after you go through it with them, they go, oh, well, that makes sense. What are some commonalities in CEOs?
Is it okay if I set the stage a little bit of how I got here?
I would love that. That might be a lot more helpful.
I think it's important. So my background is I went to school for mechanical engineering on a military scholarship, got commissioned in the Navy. We all love our military people, right?
Yep.
Got commissioned in the Navy, spent 4 years as an officer. And I will say the one thing that the military does exceptionally well is giving you the responsibility at a young age and teaching you how to lead. And there's this internal pass down of knowledge, right? Either you get to see really good leaders or you get to see really terrible leaders, but regardless, you learn about leadership. And then after I got out of the military, I spent 7 years as a mechanical engineer doing energy efficiency work. And that was all about collecting data, analyzing the data, pulling some insights out, and then using that to basically save corporations millions of dollars on their utility bills with simple fixes. And what I realized when you put those two things together, and I started to run my own business and someone introduced me to Culture Index and I was like, oh my gosh, this is marrying the two things that I love. Number one, you can get data on things and use that data to be more efficient. And number two, leadership is a learned skill. So you can go on that journey. And so for me, what I realized is when I started using Culture Index was a lot of surveys will say, oh, you're friendly, you're outgoing, right? Like I'm an extrovert. But what it doesn't tell you is how extroverted you are compared to other people. If you like 6 out of 10 people, you're an extrovert. If you like 10 out of 10 people, you're also an extrovert. But there's a difference in how you show up in the world. So for me, that was important, is understanding not just your traits, but how intense those traits are in you compared to other people. Like for you, for example, are a very proactive, assertive, aggressive, competitive person, more so than about 9 out of 10 people. But there could be someone on your team who's assertive and competitive and aggressive, but more so than like 6 or 7 people. You're not going to show up the same way when you come into the space, right? And so that I think is the first piece, is understanding not just how you show up, but how intense it shows up for you. And then there are 3 main motivational traits. Like this is Harvard-backed research, and it's either the need to compete and win, your ego. That's your main driver. These are what you think of in terms of like your traditional leaders, Elon Musk. And I call those people my sharks. You are one of my sharks, right? Where it's like, I am out here and no matter what it takes, I am going to get to my goals. I will not quit. But then there are your leaders, I call them my sunshines, and they lead by building relationships and delivering an exceptional experience to both the people around them and the people who work for them. And so they also can be really great leaders, but they're going to lead completely differently than the sharks, like how they show up in space. However, I would posit that Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, who really has made the Disney World experience what it is today, how you feel when you're in the park and why people travel from all over the world, I would posit that he is the sunshine. He leads through influencing people and creating an amazing experience. And he also has built a great business. And then finally, you've got the last motivational trait is the desire to get things right and to de-risk situations. And these people tend to gravitate towards operations and execution and technical work. And I feel like there is a bias against them because they don't show up like the Elon Musks in the world, right? But they also can build really great businesses because, like Warren Buffett, right, has built this financial investing empire by de-risking investments as much as possible and protecting people's money. So you ask me what I learned the most from Culture Index, is that number one, there's 3 different ways to lead. And until you understand how you show up, you're constantly comparing yourself against yardsticks that aren't accurate, right? Like, I'm not going to be a Warren Buffett. That's not my skill set. So I would rather learn from people like me who have succeeded operating in the world like I've operated.
What are some of the flaws in each, right? Because you just spoke about a lot of I took them as positives. Maybe they're not all positives, but the sharks are aggressive. They're never going to quit. Elon Musk, the Warren Buffetts that are very analytical and they make all their money off of being right and making very few decisions. And then you've got your sunshines like Bob Iger, who creates a great experience. But there's got to be some awareness that these CEOs have about themselves of, okay, well, these are my flaws. Like, this is what I need to work on naturally. What do you see typically in each 3 personality traits?
Great question. This is where it comes into designing your leadership team to complement you. So people will come to me, often CEOs will come to me, and one of the things they want to hire for is an executive assistant. Like, what's the best executive assistant? And that's really going to depend on how they show up as a leader and what they need, what the balance is for them. And so designing a great leadership team is all about balancing the traits to build this really comprehensive picture. And so for my sharks, the problem with them is, number one, is never enough. So every time they set a goal, before they even get there, the goal line moves. And so that's very hard on an organization. You're laughing. Yeah. Go for it. Tell me what went through your head there.
100%. I mean, we will, as soon as we start even getting close to a goal, okay, well, this goal is not big enough. Like, we messed up in our planning phase because we're actually going to hit this. Like, that shouldn't happen. So we should push a little bit harder. And then setting expectations, setting KPIs, and then they hit them, and then you still want more out of your team. And I've burned through so many good salespeople because of the way that I would show up as a leader. Is it was never good enough, and they would get burned out. And so I hired a new sales manager. He's been with me for about 8 months now, and he showed up to the organization. He's like, "Dude, why is your churn so high?" It's like, because I suck. So, what I meant by that,
not at everything, just
not at everything, but I have very high standards. I basically hold people to the same standard that I would hold myself in the sales process. And then in some ways I would hold people to an accountability that I wouldn't even hold myself to. Like, I am a train wreck in my CRM. I go in and I make a bunch of sales calls. I stir up everything. I get a bunch of people interested in selling. And then I have a tendency to just go on to the next one and to the next one. I'm always looking for the next deal and not doing my admin, not cleaning up my tasks. I've had to learn to be very disciplined to do that. And I really didn't start doing that until people were watching me. They're like, okay, well, how's John going to do it? Because however John does it is how they're going to do it. And so at the beginning, we were talking about this a while ago. It's like, how much better of a leader have you gotten from when you started to where you're at now? I would do all of those things incorrectly. I would go in the CRM, make my dials, not put my notes in because everything was just in my head as what I believed, and then just create a complete mess. But I would expect my team to go do their admin and to do everything. And they're not going to do it because if you're not doing it, they're looking at you as the standard. And so I have burned out reps by holding them to a standard that I wouldn't even hold myself to, or holding them to one standard that I hold myself to, which is close at this percentage. All of your sales conversations should have excellence, and you should also be doing your admin. And I've had to learn some people have different strengths. Some people are 3-call closers. They do really good admin. They're meticulous. And then some people are the 1-call closers that hate following up. So they're just going to try to close it that one time. And there's no right or wrong. And I learned this from Matt Ryder. Building out a team is not building out everybody that's the exact same person. It's building out a well-rounded team. Some people are the volume guy. Some people are the activity, like, they don't do a lot of volume, but they close really high. And so I laughed because my churn for years was really high inside of my company, just because I would burn people out from constantly moving the goalpost.
Mm-hmm. And even internally, I bet you're constantly moving the goalpost. So people can feel that energy from those highly autonomous people. They feel the never enough energy, even if you're not directing it at them. Mm-hmm. So that can really have a negative impact on the people around you. The other thing is highly autonomous people the sharks have the capacity, and I'm going to try to describe this without drawing it on a board, because I was just talking in a workshop with a client about this. He also is a shark, and he's crushing his highly detailed people. And I said, here's what it's like to work for you. Think of yourself as a gallon jug, and you can maybe fit 16 different little idea balls in that gallon jug. And so you hire someone, and that person is like an 8-ounce cup. They can handle 3 of your idea balls. And so either, number one, you try to give them 12, and they're just overwhelmed. There's too much. They can't contain it all. Or your little idea balls, when you actually start digging into them and asking questions, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now that 8-ounce cup can only hold 1 of those ideas, because it's actually way more of an undertaking than you anticipated. And so that, is, again, the leadership journey. What just popped into your head there?
Overloading. So this is, I actually told the executive assistant, I just hired a new one. And I told all of them in the interviewing process, hey, I've just burned through executive assistants, and that's been on me. And the reason is I would do that. I would give them, they have a strength that I don't have, which is they will make sure that it gets done correctly.
Right. They're shepherds, typically.
Typically. And so I think it will take half the time that it will actually take. Nothing will go into it. And usually, like, my skill is finding someone to do the thing that I don't know how to do, instead of, doing it properly, where they typically don't think like that. So I give them a task. They need to learn how to do it. And I have just gone through EA after EA because I'm giving them things without fully understanding their capacity and testing their capacity and slowly ramping them into where I'm like, okay, this is your max. And so I overload them, and then they get burned out. They start messing up on their task. I think they're not good anymore. And it's really just a failure on my part to understand what their capacity is, right? And then also slowly ramp them up as well, because I'll just have a tendency to go, okay, I want you to watch my day. We're going to do 1 day of training. Oh. And then you're going to understand all of it, because some people do operate like that but those people are 1,000,000 miles an hour, and they're going to drop pieces along the way. And if you are like me, and you need a good EA, you need a good executive assistant, you need someone that's going to pick up the pieces that you drop the ball on, make sure that they're following up, make sure everything is happening. They need to work at a slower pace. And if you're a high drive, 1,000,000 miles an hour all the time, you need to understand that pace is going to be a little bit slower than yours. So that's why I laughed there.
Well, and the other thing too is, like, you expect to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and you expect someone that you're paying maybe 50 or 75 or less if they're overseas, you expect them to be able to operate at the same level that you operate at. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't at all.
So that is usually the Achilles heel of high A's, and just recognizing that. And the other thing I've noticed with the highly autonomous people is that not all your ideas need to be done. And so you think because you can accomplish all your ideas, but if you can slow down for a second and say, okay, if I'm a gallon pitcher and I've got 12 balls inside of me and I want people to help with them, like, actually maybe 3 of these can go away instead of trying to do it all. And let's just focus on the best ones. So that kind of focus. For sunshines, my highly social people who are really great at influencing and experiential things, their challenge is they're too nice. They're too gullible. They hold on to people for way too long, whereas you'll fire someone in 2 days, they, look at you wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. That was old John. Right? You've gone on a great leadership journey.
There we go.
But high Bs will, they'll just really hold on to people, like, because they value relationships above anything else, and they don't want to crush someone. But what they don't realize is that if I'm a really influential person and I really like you, John, and you really like me and you're working for me, but you're not doing a great job. And I keep coming in every day and giving you a pep talk. John, you're doing great. You'll get this. And you're like, I just don't feel like I'm getting it, but she believes in me, so I'm going to keep trying. You can hold on to people for too long and they are miserable. And so they're actually shooting themselves in the foot by trying to value this person and maintain them. They're actually keeping them in a space where they're not doing well. They know they're not doing well. And so that and just getting taken advantage of because they want to believe the best in people.
Can you explain, you're talking high A, high D, like what are the different, the ones that don't understand what that means? What does that mean to be a high A, to be a high D, C, B, whatever it is?
Sorry about that, listeners. So the three main traits are autonomy, social ability, and conformity, detail preferences. And so that's why I call them the sharks, sunshines, and shepherds. The sharks are, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm a kind of solo person. My sunshines are the high social people, really good at connecting to people, and my shepherds are my high conformity. Like, we are going to do it right. Those are D's. So, thanks for that.
And the Warren Buffetts in the world, where do they struggle? Because to me, that I'm like, I wish I was more like that. I wish I was more like the two traits that I'm not, right? And so we talked about the struggles with sunshines and sharks, but I think the other ones you said are
shepherds. Shepherds, yeah, they protect.
What are their flaws that they need to work on? If somebody's listening, they're like, I'm a shepherd for sure. I'm very slow paced, methodical. What do they struggle with?
And I would say the shepherds aren't always slow paced. Some of them move quickly, but in their hearts, they are rigid perfectionists. And so the problem with that is that nothing is ever good enough. And I'll ask them this, I'll say, when is it ever good enough? Never. Everything that they turn in, they're thinking, they're the kids in school who, even if they got a 99 on a test, all they think about is the 1 point that they lost because it should have been 100. And honestly, they should have gotten extra credit. And so for them, it's really struggling with not overdoing things, right? Because there's a business case to be made for return on investment of time. So if you can finish something, if you're an employee at $100 an hour and you can be finished something in 8 hours, but you choose instead to spend 24 on it, you are costing your company money. And so learning when it's good enough. And honestly, high detail people, the shepherds, really have a hard time knowing when it's good enough. And so the way that they succeed is by putting someone on their team that they trust, who is less detail oriented, who they can clearly say, is this good enough? Should I be done?
So are these, let's say you've identified yourself at this point as a shark, a sunshine, or a shepherd. You haven't made a hire yet. You're just running everything by yourself, but you're one of those three. Should your first hire be the exact opposite of you? Does it depend on the business? Or what are you typically coaching CEOs when they need to make a hire and they don't know who that should be?
We really look at what the role is. So I would say, instead of looking at who the person is, first clearly defining the gap in your organization. Like, what's the one move such that by doing it, other things become irrelevant, right? That's John Keller's the one thing. And so when you look at your business, where you're at, where's the biggest gap? And I'll run this exercise with my clients where we'll put their org chart up and I have them rate. In fact, anyone listening to this, rate your leadership team person by person on a scale of 1 to 10, no 7s. And anybody who's a 6 or below, we go in and we quantify what that underperformance is costing the company. So if I have someone in finance who's a 6, usually the question will be, well, if you had someone who's a 10 out of 10, what things would they be doing that this person isn't doing? And so this is a real world example from one of my clients. They're a $15 million company in manufacturing, and they're a pretty tenured company. They've been around, I think, for about 20 or 30 years. And I said, if your finance person is not performing, what things should they be doing that would make them a 10 out of 10 that would benefit the business? And they said, well, they should be going through all of our product lines and looking at, by product, where are we not making money? And on the products that we are making money, which ones make the most money? And then seeing which of these we can eliminate from our production. And I said, all right, if you had someone who had the time and capacity to do that, what would that mean to your company in dollars? And he was like, easily $1 million next year. Because right now they have all this overhead and payroll supporting these product lines that don't make them money. And if they could instead repurpose and do more business development around their money-making product lines, then that would be a huge multiplier, right? And so that's what we do is we say, like, I look at everyone on your leadership team, and I truly believe that if you get the right leader, everything below them falls into place. So in some of my organizations, you've got leaders and they're running divisions of 100 people or more. And when I'm like, if that team's not performing, who's the leadership? Inevitably, when they rate the leadership of that team, it will be a 6 or less. So I'm like, what happens if you get a 10 out of 10 in there? That whole organization comes up. I went totally off track there. You asked, how do you know where to hire? I said, first you have to identify what's the gap in the organization.
Yeah, I don't think that's off track at all. I think that it is interesting to hear that when you've got low performing employees or a low performing department, just go rate your leadership team. And there's an interesting, have you ever read the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins?
Oh, I listened to it. Yes.
Yeah. Good one. And you know what? I might be mixing up two books. I might be mixing up Extreme Ownership by Jocko. And I think that's actually where this came from. I'm just thinking Navy SEALs.
Is it Everything's Your Fault at the end?
Well, what I'm referring to is there's a part in the book where one of the teams is underperforming. They're getting beat on every race. They're losing every.
Oh, that was in Jocko's in Extreme Ownership.
Yeah. So
it was Navy SEALs, and they switched the leaders out, kept the same people, and switched the leaders. And sure enough,
started winning.
Yep.
And to me, it was such an interesting case study to know that you could have the same team with a different leader and have completely drastic results. And there's another book, I think this was in Rocket Fuel, that talks about the traits of a good CEO versus a bad CEO. And the good CEOs were always talking about the things that the team was doing. They were always putting the credibility back on the team. Mm-hmm. And then the bad CEOs they would ask, well, what have you done to contribute to the company's success? Good CEOs are saying, well, it's all my team that's doing everything. The bad CEOs are always blaming it. They're saying, well, I did this, and this, but the team's not very good. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's a lot of correlation between just leadership and performance, which is why it should be the number one thing that you focus on once you start scaling a company, right? You need to get good at sales. You need to get good at marketing, and that will get you pretty far, right? That will get you to, most of the time, I think you can get to $1 million a year in the real estate investing space by being good at marketing and sales. If you can just do those two things really well, that'll take you, to $1 million. To get past that, every company that I've seen, including my own, you need to learn how to work with people. Otherwise, you're just stuck, right? You're always stuck. And you're the bottleneck. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to hear, is that you're the bottleneck in your business, because the thing that got you from 0 to 1 million isn't the thing that's going to get you from 1 million to 2 million, 1 million to 10 million, right? There's going to be different problems. And everything that I've read so far all comes down to how you hire, manage, and lead people.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, you are always the bottleneck. The CEO is always the bottleneck. Like within a 15-minute conversation with the CEO, if I say, what's your number one problem? I can pull that out and I can tell you it's either, what the reason is, right? Either you're not holding your team accountable, you are being too accountable and micromanaging them, and like you're giving them responsibility with no authority to act, or you're just crushing their spirits.
That happens a lot. So I know there's no fine line in the sand, and depending on your personality type, you're going to look at this differently. But how do you know when to build somebody up versus let somebody go?
I think it's a parallel path, like loving but firm, where the hardest thing is, as a CEO, is clearly defining success metrics for a seat. So we were just going down this route with a company where we're helping. They're hiring 8 different people. They're about a 50-person company, and they're really growing. And they're hiring 8 people right now in different roles. Some of them it's really easy to define, right? With salespeople, it's like outbound activity. Those are your lead indicators. And your lag indicators are like number of closes or number of contracts in a month. And you can say to someone on a sales team, you have to get 2 contracts a month. And if you don't get 2 contracts a month by 3 months in or whatever you set, then we're going to have a hard conversation. And so I think that's the way, if you can clearly define it and you just say, hey, here's where I need you to get. I really believe in you. I'm willing to give you the resources you need. But at the end of the day, this is what success in the role looks like. Some of them, it was like client experience. And so I said, how do you know if someone's good delivering client experience? And that's a really gut feel. You know the people on your team who deliver an exceptional client experience, but how are you measuring it? And so we worked with them and I said, well, do you measure response time? Is responsiveness important? And they're like, yes. And I said, do you measure response time? They said, no. I said, can you measure response time? They said, yes. All right. And then I said, do you ever do client net promoter scores or any sort of like rate our thing on a scale of 1 to 10? They were like, no. And I said, so I think if you did those two things, responsiveness and then experience, you would know which of your people are good at their job and which aren't. And but really thinking through it like that is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a call and I didn't even let you get to this point because my tendency is if I don't think they're going to work, they're not. So if I'm questioning it, and I vividly remember talking to you and saying, hey, there's like 4 points I want to cover today. The last one was, should I let go of this employee or should I keep them? And then we didn't have time to get to it. And I told you, well, I'm considering it. So the fact that I'm considering it is probably a red flag. So I'm just going to let them go. And then I did. And was that a bad choice? I don't believe so. I think that where I failed as a leader is I didn't define what success looks like. I just said, hey, your job is to be good at marketing, right? Run all of our campaigns, make sure they happen. And I didn't really give this girl the tools as well to be able to succeed. And you need to know your different levels of employees because you can't take a level 1 kind of a task doer on a task doer salary and then expect them to do level 3, which is there's a presentation that Hormozy gave with the owner of Reel. And he's like, the higher skilled the employee, the less direction you need to give them, the less detail you need to give them. Right. So if Sherrod told me, hey, go grow this company, Hormozy would say, okay, yeah, got you. Let me go do it. He'll go grow it. You go and take a VA from the Philippines that has only done cold calling, and that's the only thing they've done, and you tell them, go grow my company. They're going to look at you and they're like a toddler. They're not going to know what does that mean, grow the company? How do you want me to grow the company? Right. And so I know where I failed, and I think a lot of other people do as well, is they try to get level 1 employees with level 1 salaries and give them level 3 activities. Go grow this. And I think that's where I failed with this marketing. It was a marketing manager, and she had been a low level marketing manager at a different company, just doing like basic stuff. And I'm like, hey, you need to come on and you need to get me, I'm at a 4x return on my ad spend right now. You need to get me at a 5. It's like, how, right? How does your business work? How am I supposed to do that? And if she was an executive, if she ran a marketing department for an entire company, maybe she'd be able to figure that out, but not on a, $40,000 a year salary. And so I think it's interesting that you said to make sure you're defining what success looks like. But I also think to add on to that, depending on what level they're at, if you're hiring a COO, you probably don't need to be as direct. But if you're hiring, like a lot of people hire their first hire, they can define, hey, success looks like 3Xing our marketing. Okay, but how? How are you going to do that, right? What are the daily things? What are the training that's required to get there? I think a lot of people overlook that as well, don't you think?
And also the component of that you don't mention is the strategy piece. There's execution and then there's strategy. And so to get your marketing from a 4X to a 5X requires strategy. But you're not paying someone for strategy. You're paying them for execution. And you're expecting them to do strategy. I see that often.
So if you are in that position, and that is something that I've never identified, it's very interesting that you talk about, is breaking out strategy versus execution, right? When can you get someone to start, or can you take someone that was hired for execution and then having them start to do strategy? Or are those two different personality types? Do you need to wait till you're C-level, where you can say, hey, at this point, this is where we start to bring on people that are going to do the strategy, and then we'll have people underneath them doing execution?
There are people who are gifted at strategy, and there are people who are gifted at tell me what to do and I will make it happen really well. And I'm not going to say you can never do it, because one thing we talk about with your inherent traits is it's like hand dominancy is an inherent trait. Starts showing up at around 5 or 6 years old. So if I ask you to come to work and write with your dominant hand, you can do that. It comes easy. It's pretty effortless. It doesn't require a whole lot of mental effort. If I instead ask you to come to work and write with your non-dominant hand, You can do it. I'll be able to read your stuff, but the quality is not going to be as good, and it's going to take you longer, and it's going to require more mental effort. So when I ask a person who is naturally gifted at execution to do strategy and vice versa, it's like asking them to write with their non-dominant hand. The results are not going to be stellar.
How can you tell if someone's good at strategy versus execution in the interviewing process?
You bring in a behavioral analytics tool.
And so let's say you do, right? What are you looking for? Like what type of personalities are more strategists and what type of people are more, executionists?
Sharks are strategists. That's all they do. They want to live in the future. They want to set big goals. They want to figure out how to get there with minimal input. And then depending on what kind of execution you need, if you need influential execution or experience, then you probably want your sunshines. If you want highly detailed, accurate execution, then you want your shepherds.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, and I was guilty of this, and then I saw this in some like previous partnerships where they were also as guilty as they get their personality index back and then they take their weaknesses and they say, well, I just don't do that. Like, oh, I'm just not a detailed person. I'm not going to do detail. And I used to buy that as well. And Jim Quick has a saying, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And what I've come to realize is a lot of, one, your personality, yes, like you just said, it's what comes natural to you. So like writing with your right hand versus writing with your left hand. But what I believe is you can 100% work on the flaws that you have and get pretty good at them. And so for me, naturally, I'm not a very detailed person, but I've had to learn how to be detailed because I have a lot on the line, right? So I have to learn how to read agreements, how to read purchase agreements correctly, sending out wiring information, sending out, money constantly. I've had to learn how to be disciplined and be detailed. And I feel like a lot of people just buy into, oh, well, that's not my personality. Like I'm never going to be good at that. And then, so then they're not, right? Do you feel like people can change some of their personality traits and improve on them and get better? Or do you think, oh, you're a low attention to detail. You're screwed. You're never going to be good at that.
You go back to the handwriting exercise, right? If you wrote with your non-dominant hand every day for years and years and years, you would get really good at it. So I do believe it. I just don't think that it's the highest and best use of your time, right? Let's say you're worth, I don't know, $200 an hour. Your time's worth $200 an hour. Can you find somebody for $100 an hour to read the contracts that you trust? I don't, of course, I'm the same way. And also there's some humility that goes along with it. Like that, I just suck at details. Like, no, that's not a license for bad behavior. That means you should have some self-awareness and understand when it's appropriate and when it's not.
Yeah. And I think there's like two different stages where this becomes important. One, if you're at the startup stage and you can't afford employees.
Right. It's got to be you.
You just have to suck it up. You have to learn how to do it, or you can keep the excuse and you can never be successful. Right? You've got two options. You suck it up. You learn how to improve on your weaknesses until you get your business to a place where you can hire that out. And then there's your second stage where you've got the cash reserves, you've got the revenue and the profit to justify bringing somebody on. And then it makes sense to say, okay, well, this isn't my strength, so I'm going to bring somebody on that it is their strength. Right? But where I think a lot of people they use it as an excuse not to succeed, or worse, and this is what bothers me even more, is they throw it on their partner and they say, hey, I'm just not good at this. Like whoever their business partner is, they use it as an excuse to be lazy. And they'll say, I'm not good at details. Like you have to do the details. And the other person might not be good at details either. They're just the one that's willing to do the work. And so I've seen both of those. When someone comes to you, they have a weakness and they're at the startup stage. Maybe you don't coach a lot of startups, like very, very like no employees that are looking for leadership training, because usually you're not when you're just starting. You're looking
with our mutual mastermind, 7-Figure Flipping, we did a lot of that early stage. I want to scale. I have a couple thoughts if I can share them. Number one is, especially early stage startup, the number one thing you can do really fast is to get good at understanding the finances of your business, because not understanding it is not a reason to spend money you don't have. So I will often see that where people are like, I don't like doing this, so I'm going to hire someone. I'm like, well, you don't get to. You haven't earned the right yet to hire somebody. So you do have to get down in the weeds and know that stuff. And then you can set goals for yourself that when you have 6 months of salary in the bank for that hire, then you get to hire someone. But don't hire 5 people all at once and banking on future revenue that's not coming or may not come, because that is the fastest way to bankruptcy that I have seen.
Yeah. And it doesn't come very naturally unless you are, naturally you're one of those people that you're always looking at your finances. But I think, at least for me and probably other sharks out there, they're just always thinking about like the future growth and scaling. And
top line. My sharks think about top line.
And you need to. I just had a call with another coach who I was telling like, hey, I want to double my revenue this year. He's like, dude, thinking about the wrong metric. Who cares about doubling your revenue? How can you double your profit and do the exact same amount of revenue that you're doing right now? Right. And if you think about it, like that is especially in the wholesaling community, because everybody talks about revenue all the time, right? Wholesalers and flippers are the most guilty. And you see these Instagram influencers that are going around interviewing people saying like, how much did you make last month? They're like, I made $100,000. Okay. You made $100,000. You spent $30,000 on ads. You spent $20,000 on commissions. Like you didn't walk away with 100, but it's the only thing that people focus on. And you're right. It is a discipline that you need to learn if you're not naturally gifted at being able to analyze your finances. You have to go.
What did I tell you on the last coaching call that we had? I said, you need to find someone to tell you no.
Yeah.
Because sharks just are like, well, I'm going to do this and it'll make me money. I'm going to spend 200,000 and it'll make me $1 million. And you do that 5 times in a year and you just lost yourself $1 million if none of them pan out. Yep. So being responsible about saying, I'm going to bring somebody onto my team or I'm going to execute this new strategy, but I have the finances in place. There's I actually just met them 2 weeks ago, but there's this group called Accounted For. They're in the physical therapy space, but what they do is they help physical therapist businesses. Like they coach owners on how to deal with money. So reading your P&L, reading your balance statement, setting a budget for the year, not necessarily the doing of the work that a CPA or a bookkeeper does, but teaching young CEOs how to be financially literate. And I said, oh man, there is such a need for that in the world.
Yeah. And I'll tell you the biggest thing that I realized after implementing this. I've had a fractional CFO for about 2 years now. And the first year, he would show me my P&L. He would we wouldn't even meet. He would just send me my P&L every month and just, hey, cool. And sometimes profit margins were great. Sometimes profit margins were negative. Right. And so there was no action items on that. And then when we spoke about that, getting someone to tell you no. My fear was I am going to feel caged, like I'm going to feel restricted because I have someone else telling me no. But what I learned is the opposite happened. I have so much freedom now, and it feels like a weight lifted off of my shoulders that I go to someone that's not me, because my default will be, oh, we've got extra money, marketing. Needs to go into marketing. Again, sharks right in the top line, and right back to the conversation that I just had with my other coach, is always thinking about revenue. Well, the answer is always to spend more on marketing, and that defaults to low profit margins. Instead of looking at ways to fix your business to scale something that actually works. And so once I started asking him for permission for everything, every big expense that we have, I felt free. I felt like, okay, I've got a sense of freedom now that my finances are in someone's hands that actually, one, is not emotionally invested in the business. So all of the decisions that he makes are non-emotional. They're just, hey, you can do that. You can do this if you think this, or this is a bad idea. I would not do that. How are your projections for next month? Let's meet on those before we decide to spend any money. Like, what do you have actually set to close? And I would never think of that before. I would just think, we'll figure it out, because we always do. And luckily we have figured it out, but it's like the people that we work with that go into foreclosure. Like, yeah, figuring it out gets you so far until it doesn't. Right. And there's a freedom to having someone tell you no when you are go all the time. And someone that's not emotionally attached to the business can make better decisions for you.
And that, again, goes to having a strong leadership team, right? Because every business, and whether this is a fractional advisor on your leadership team or an in-house person, you need a finance person. You need someone who's a strategist on marketing and sales. You need someone who's a strategist on operations, maybe on customer experience, but that usually can fall under operations. So like there are these key, across every business, these key areas where every CEO needs either an advisor or an embedded leadership person. And then your life gets better and you feel free.
So I probably should have started with this. Tell me a little bit more about your journey from going, because you've also, we didn't even talk about this, but you were an investor for a while. You did some things with 7-figure flipping, and now you are consulting much bigger businesses, consulting businesses that are doing 15 million a year. I think you've mentioned some that are doing a lot more than that. What did that look like for you?
It has been a really interesting journey because I was talking to someone the other day and I said, would high school you ever believe where you actually ended up? What your life looks like?
High school me was a loser. I almost dropped out of high school.
Right? You could never have imagined where the journey would take you. And yet when you look back, you see the natural stepping stone. So I worked in corporate America in the engineering space for a big global company and was on this leadership track where I would be an executive. And I've seen a lot of my friends go on it. It's very lucrative. They all make between $500 and $1 million a year now. And they all travel about 200 to 300 days a year. And when I was part of this leadership cohort, I was in my 20s. I was probably the youngest person in the room. I was the youngest person in the room. And I remember looking around. There were the 14 heads of the different business units in this global company. And they were like sitting back and ask us anything. Ask us anything. And I said, all right, how many of you are still married to the same person you were married to when you started this journey? And one out of 14 was. And they had reasons. But then I said, how many days did you travel last year? And the one guy said 276 days. And he knew it. Like he knew the days. And wow. I said, well, it's no wonder that you're married to your work, essentially. And that was okay for them. But that was kind of the big turning point for me into that's not what I want. And that's when I started flipping houses. And that was super fun. And then I flipped 3 houses one year and then 6 the next and then 12 the year after that. And then I added in wholesaling. And around then I started growing my team. And through 7-figure flipping, got introduced to both EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the key pieces of EOS is right person, right seats. They recommend you bring in a behavioral analytics tool to help with this. And so then someone introduced me to Culture Index. And it was magical. The idea that you could turn people into data and then use data to be better with people. Like it's like a cheat sheet almost on every interaction you go into. It's so fun.
Yeah.
So I grew my real estate investing business to about 10 employees at the high side, including my own in-house construction crew of 5 people. And then I got asked to come on board and grow 7-figure flipping. And that was, I think, 5 people at the time. And I had been a member of that mastermind and loved it. Just awesome stuff. And I was like, this is so cool. And so over the next 3 years, we grew the mastermind and then we ended up building a team of about 25 people. And what I found interesting in that group, at any given time, there's probably between 100 and 200 members during that journey. We grew up from 100 and now I think we might be close to 300 now. But watching these people go on this journey, I rarely saw people break through the ceiling of that 10 to 20 employees. I kept seeing people, and those people in the group were the people who are like, oh my gosh, they've made it. And what I would see is they would get to about 20 employees and they would crash and burn. And not all the time, but like that.
We know the same people. Yeah, that's similar. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's because they were smashing up against the leadership ceiling that they didn't even see, right? It was this glass ceiling they kept hitting, and it had 100% to do with how do I lead great leaders? Because there was this tendency to want to hire someone and just let them go, right? They've got it.
Yep.
I'm going to go do something else now. Like they're good. They're good. But you can never take your eye off the ball. As the CEO, you're the chief executive officer, meaning you have to lead your leaders. And I'm convinced that is the breaking point between that, 15 to 30 employees, is learning how to stop leading everything and lead a small group of really effective leaders. And so I just kept thinking over and over in my head, like hundreds, thousands, millions of businesses have made this turn from, there's the solopreneur to small business, which is like the 1 to 10 employees. And then there's when you start having more than 10 employees, you need to kind of bring on another leader alongside you because any given person can really only manage about 5 to 6 people effectively. So once you start getting up in that 10, 11, 12, you've got enough that you should be thinking about your second leader, but you're still working hand in hand. It's you and that leader. It's like your partner, right?
Yeah.
And then as you start to get to 20 employees, now you've got a leadership team. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is how do you bust through that ceiling? And so I got really interested in it. And at the same time, parallel path, my husband, I met him in college. He's also a mechanical engineer in the aerospace field. He had co-founded his own company. They were growing. They were in this like crazy spot. And back to my decision about leaving corporate America to be with my family, I'm like, my family is the number one thing for me. I want to be with them. And so I stepped away from my full-time role in seven-figure flipping so I could be the primary parent. And guess what happened when a shark tries to stop moving? They like start to die inside.
Yep. I could imagine.
So after 6 months of forcing myself to try and sit in stillness, I was like, this sucks. I hate it. I'm really unhappy. I love my kids, but they were back in school. I've got teenagers, so like they didn't need me. And my culture index advisor came to me and said, you should become a culture index advisor. It will be the most fun you've ever had. And you'll make a bunch of money doing it. And you get to control your schedule so you can be home and be the primary parent. And that was 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, getting this exposure into the back end of bigger businesses and actually being part of the journey from I have one that went from 15 employees to 25. So we're there. And I've got one that's going from 50 to 80. And I've got one that's going from 80 to 120. And then I have a client that has 1,300 employees. And so it has like mini businesses. Each department becomes a mini business of like 100 people inside of there.
Yeah.
And it is so fun. It is so fun, but it always comes back to your leaders.
Where can people find out if they're looking for leadership training? How do people find more about you?
Oh, that's great. So my culture index is the tool that I license. I was telling you earlier, it's like I'm a real estate agent. I hang my shingle with culture index. They're a great tool. I run their program, but it's my practice, my consulting practice. So you can find me at magneticconsulting.net or bshea at cultureindex.com.
BSHEA at cultureindex.com. Beka, this has been incredibly fun, and I have gotten so much out of your coaching. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your gift with the world and continuing to help people not suck so much at leadership, because most people do.
It's a journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Beka. This is the Zeroed In Podcast, signing off.